Clyde, you were saying depending on what season it is, how did the work on the ranch change during the various seasons?
Oh, it changed from winter to summer, summer to winter. In the wintertime, you had to go out and break ice and feed cattle. Several different pastures had windmills. Had to go out and break ice on the tanks and then throw it out so the cows could drink. Sometime if the daggum windmill was turning, wasn't pumping water, you had to go pull it out. Pull the sugar rod out, and if you couldn't, if the bottom valve wasn't working, you had to pull the whole daggum line out. You get your self wet if it wasn't working right. That really took a lot of time to do it. Once you started pulling, we had to use the truck and the pulley, rope pulley in order to pull everything out. And once you start back in, you had to clamp it down in order to put the pipe back in and go on down. Sometimes you can pick up that checker valve at the bottom by screwing it in and pull it up too. Sometimes if you couldn't get it, like part would come apart where you couldn't get it in there, and then have to change the leathers and stuff like that on everything. I used to climb windmills all the time around here, putting a bar across the top, hook it up, and come down, and sometimes I had to go up and bring the rope down and hook up again.
Mike,
It was fun working here.
yeah, wintertime was you were talking about feeding too, Skeet. Mike, what was the feed? Was it just hay?
No, we fed some cake too, depending. We would get a bulk load of cake cubes. It's called different things, but it's a protein pellet that feed the cattle. I'll try to give them a pound or two a day. There'd be crews that would do that, and others that would break ice. And we'd feed them hay a lot of times also. Everybody had their own job. And, you get stuck breaking ice, you did that day in and day out. Depending on the weather, sometimes we were fortunate enough to have these mild winters. You didn't have to worry about so much ice, but I remember breaking ice when it was 6-8 inches thick, and you pull out a couple chunks like that gets pretty heavy. And as the cold weather persisted, you'd have a pile of ice around the tank, and the cattle couldn't get to it. You'd have to move the ice eventually. But that was pretty much the winter time. Took up the winter.
How many cattle were on the ranch, Walter?
As far as I remember, there was close to 2,000 on all the different ranches. It wasn't just the main ranch here. There was the Cherokee north of Kiowa, and the Quarter Circle Bell north of Elizabeth, and plus some other places. And it seemed like there was, it might have varied, but there was between 1,000 and 2,000 head of cattle all the time. Probably, he had a small registered herd too, a seed stock for his commercial Herefords. So it seemed like it could be close to 2,000 head. It'd take us 2 weeks to brand everything.
And they were primarily Herefords?
Yes, yeah. They would either be dehorned but they didn't have horns. Not all of them, but the registered cattle did. But they were purebred Herefords, most of them.
What about horses, Mike? How many horses were around the ranch?
Well, almost all the cowboys had a couple assigned to them. Nobody had their own except Bud, the foreman. We had a couple that were assigned to you. You rode one a day. Sometimes you'd ride him all day, he'd rest a day, and then you'd ride another one. Generally had 2 apiece, depending on how many hands were here, 10, 12 you know, people working, married and single guys. And some, we get the horses sometimes from the polo club, they bring them up and want us to ride them for a while, to get them broke. And horses kind of evolved, you know, you'd have one for a while, if you got broke down, you'd get rid of him, they'd give you another one. Seniority, they bring in a herd of horses, the senior guys got to pick horses first, and if you were a newbie, you got to tail in.